Have you ever sworn off using something that you loved using? When I was a teenager, my desire to attract the girls in my village caused me to give up my favorite bad habit. It was torture, and I would never give up that habit again. I felt there must be an easier way to attract the opposite sex. In Hannibal, when I was 15, I was for a short time a cadet of temperance, an organization which probably covered the whole United States during as much as a year, possibly longer. It consisted of a pledge to refrain during membership from the use of alcohol. I mean, it consisted partly in that pledge and partly in a red merino sash. But the red merino sash was the main part. The boys joined in order to be privileged to wear that sash. The pledge part of the matter was of no consequence. It was so small in importance that, contrasted with the sash, it was in effect non-existent. The organization was weak and impermanent because there was not enough holidays to support it. We could turn out and march and show the red sashes on May Day with the Sunday schools and on the 4th of July with the Sunday schools, the independent fire company and the militia company. But you can't keep a juvenile moral institution alive on 2 displays of its sash per year. As a private, I could not have held out beyond 1 procession, but I was illustrious, grand, worthy secretary and royal inside sentinel. So I had the privilege of inventing the passwords and of wearing a rosette on my sash. Under these conditions, I was enabled to remain steadfast until I had gathered the glory of 2 displays, May Day and, of course, the 4th of July. Then I resigned straightway and straightway left the lodge. Amazingly, I had not smoked for 3 full months, and no words can adequately describe the smoke appetite that was consuming me. I had been a smoker from my 9th year, a private one during the first 2 years, but a public one after that. That is to say, after my father passed away. I was smoking and utterly happy before I was 13 steps from the lodge door. I don't know what brand of cigar it was. It was probably not choice, or the previous smoker would not have thrown it away so soon. But to me, it was the best cigar that was ever made. The previous smoker would have thought the same if he had been without a cigar for 3 months. I smoked that stub without shame. I could not do it now without shame because now I am more refined than I was then. But I would smoke it just the same. I knew myself, and I know the human race well enough to know that. In those days, the native cigar was so cheap that a person could afford anything. They could afford cigars. Mr. Garth had a great tobacco factory, and he also had a small shop in the village for the retail sale of his products. He had one brand of cigar which even poverty itself was able to buy. He had these in stock a good many years, and although they looked well enough on the outside, their insides had decayed to dust and would fly out like a puff of vapor when they were broken in two. This brand was very popular on account of its extreme cheapness. Mr. Garth had other brands which were so cheap and some that were bad, but the supremacy over them enjoyed by this brand was indicated by its name. It was called Garth's Damnedest. We used to trade old newspapers in exchange for that brand. There was another shop in the village where the conditions were friendly to penniless boys. It was kept by a lonely and melancholy little hunchback, and we could always get a supply of cigars by fetching a bucket of water for him from the village pump, whether he needed it or not. One day we found him asleep in his chair, a custom of his, and we waited patiently for him to wake up, which was a custom of ours. But he slept so long this time that at last our patience was exhausted, and we tried to wake him up. But he was dead. I remember the shock of it to this day. In my early manhood and in middle life, I used to vex myself with reforms every now and then, and I never had occasion to regret these divergencies for whether the resulting deprivations were long or short. The rewarding pleasure which I got out of the vice when I returned to it always paid me for all that it cost. When I met Olivia, I said that I would give up tobacco if she made me sacrifice that on condition of us getting married. Luckily for me, she never made that demand, although I also know that I would have followed through and given up tobacco for her. As it was, my smoking was restricted to the billiard room, where I happily blew smoke rings out the window for hours each day. Of course, in my mind, this always counted as work time. What a life. A wonderful family downstairs and whiskey and tobacco upstairs. Every man should be that lucky. So ask yourself, what have you ever given up that was in any sense the equivalent of my not smoking for 3 months?